The excavator I hired slammed its bucket into the dam I had built with my own hands, blowing it apart like a thunderstrike. Mud hit my boots, concrete shattered under the tracks, and the creek behind my house roared as if it had been waiting to break free. Deputy Collins read the insurance notice in a cold, practiced voice, while Carol Benton stood behind him, smiling like she'd finally broken me. Neighbors watched from behind their fences, unsure who to blame. Then my weather radio crackled. Flash flood warning, moving fast. And as I tore down the final piece, one thought hit hard. In a few minutes, she's going to wish I never did this. If the storm had a human form, it was Carol Benton. And unfortunately for all of us, she didn't wait for rain to start flooding people's lives. Carol was the kind of HOA president who treated a clipboard like a weapon. Every morning, she power-walked the neighborhood in her designer leggings and oversized sunglasses, pretending she was just checking on community standards. But everyone knew she was hunting for violations, hunting for control, hunting for someone to remind who was in charge. I'd seen her stop a delivery driver just to lecture him about parking symmetry. I'd watched her make a grown man repaint his front door because the shade of blue felt emotionally disruptive. And once, God help us all, she fined an elderly widow for having a garden wind chime that wasn't architecturally aligned with the neighborhood. But Carol's favorite target was anyone who didn't bend. That happened to be me. I kept to myself, fixed my own problems, and didn't ask the HOA for permission to breathe. The moment my little dam stopped the flooding in our cul-de-sac, neighbors thanked me, while Carol stared at it like it was a personal insult. It wasn't the dam she hated. It was the idea that I'd solved something she couldn't control. And with every email she sent, every snide smile she flashed, every safety concern she invented, I felt her plan tightening around me like a noose. She didn't want a safer neighborhood. She was, and I had just become her perfect enemy. I moved into Silver Ridge Bluffs almost 30 years ago, long before the HOA got drunk on its own authority. Back then, it was just a quiet hillside neighborhood with a creek running behind the lower cul-de-sac. My wife Ellen loved the sound of the water at night. I loved the space to work on weekend projects. It was peaceful, simple, the kind of place you expected to grow old in without trouble. But that creek had a mean streak. Every heavy rain, the water shot down the hill like a freight train. My backyard turned into pudding. Mark and Jenna's tool shed flooded so often that we joked it needed its own life jacket. We filed complaints, sent photos, spoke at meetings. Nothing changed. The HOA took our dues every month, but when it came to actual problems, the answer was always the same. Out of budget, homeowner responsibility. So I did what I'd done my entire life, what 4 decades as an electrician had taught me to do. I solved the problem myself. I spent weekends studying runoff charts, watching the flow after storms, sketching plans at the kitchen table. I didn't want a fancy structure, just something sturdy and practical. A small overflow channel, a reinforced concrete weir that could slow the surge and send excess water safely toward the wooded drainage path. When it was finished, it worked better than I imagined. The next storm came, and for the first time in years, the creek stayed in its lane. Our yard stayed dry. Neighbors thanked me, brought me beer and sandwiches, joked that I should run the HOA. But the morning Carol saw it, I knew trouble was coming. She didn't ask how it worked or why we needed it. She just stared at the dam with this tight, measured smile, like she was already planning its funeral. After that, the tone of every HOA message changed. Suddenly everything had risk potential, or structural concerns, or possible violation pending review. It wasn't about safety. It wasn't about the creek. It was about control. And as emails turned into warnings, and warnings turned into veiled threats, I started to feel something I'd never associated with my own backyard. I wasn't safe on my own property anymore. The first hint that things were shifting came in the form of a friendly courtesy notice. It looked harmless, bright logo, polite wording, no fine. But every sentence was a warning dressed as a suggestion. Unapproved hydrological structure detected. Alteration of natural water flow requires review. Potential liability downstream. It read like it had been written by someone who wanted me nervous without giving me enough to fight back. A few days later, I caught Carol on the walking trail behind my fence. She paused, lifted her phone, and took photos of my backyard like she was scouting a crime scene. "Documenting conditions," she said without looking at me. Conditions. The way she said it made my stomach tighten. By the end of the week, I received 2 more notices, each worded more firmly than the last. No demands yet, no threats of fines, but the message was clear. She wasn't trying to understand the dam. She was building a case against it, and against me. Trouble turned physical the morning I walked outside and found orange stakes hammered into the ground behind my yard. Bright surveyor tape stretched across the back like a barricade. A metal sign dangled from my fence. Drainage easement. Community access. I stared at it in disbelief. For 30 years, that strip behind my fence had been my property. My deed didn't lie. But suddenly, overnight, the HOA claimed it was communal land. Carol arrived hours later with 2 board members and a man in a reflective vest. They inspected the line like archaeologists discovering ruins, pointing, nodding, pretending to be official. "That's my property," I called from the deck. Carol slipped on her patient, condescending smile. "Updated maps show shared responsibility now, Dale. We're ensuring safety compliance." The man in the vest raised his phone and snapped photos over my fence, into my yard, into my privacy. I printed my deed and taped it to the window. They saw it. They didn't care. For the first time in all my years living there, I didn't feel like a homeowner. I felt like a target. The sabotage came during a quiet Tuesday night storm. I went out with a flashlight to check the dam, expecting the usual slow, controlled flow. Instead, the beam of my light revealed chaos. Broken branches, chunks of someone's old retaining wall, a rusted lawn chair, trash bags weighed down with rocks. Someone had deliberately piled debris against the front of the dam to make it look unstable and dangerous. My camera pole had been twisted sideways, screws ripped half out, lens pointing straight into the sky. I felt my jaw clench. For an hour I worked in the rain, hauling away junk that had never been there before, junk someone wanted photographed as evidence. By morning, an official-looking envelope arrived. Notice of hazardous condition. Attached was a grainy photo of the dam buried in the debris I'd just cleared. Time-stamped, weaponized. I called Nina, who arrived with her tools and notebook. She inspected the dam, tested the flow, checked the edges. Then she shook her head. "This wasn't an accident," she said. "Someone staged this." Her words weren't surprising. They were confirmation. Someone wasn't just accusing me. Someone was actively framing me. I expected a fine. I didn't expect a deputy. Deputy Collins arrived mid-afternoon, cruiser idling at the curb. He handed me a packet without much ceremony. "We received a report that your structure may pose a flood risk," he said. "County's reviewing it. Insurance carrier, too." Inside the packet were photocopies of Carol's safety concern report. Page after page of dramatic wording and manipulated photos. Words like catastrophic failure and threat to life jumped off the page. Not a single reference to engineering, just fear. "I have video proving the debris was planted," I told him, "and a documented inspection from a licensed engineer." "You can email all that to the address at the back," he said. "They'll add it to the file." He wasn't rude, he wasn't disrespectful. He just wasn't on my side. When he left, an uncomfortable truth settled in my chest. Carol had escalated this past neighborhood politics. She was pulling in anyone with a badge, a seal, or a letterhead, and I didn't have any of those. The letter that detonated everything arrived on a Monday. A thick envelope from Rivergate Mutual Flood Insurance sat in my mailbox like a lump of concrete. I opened it on my porch. My hands shook by the second sentence. It wasn't just my policy, it was everyone's. Due to unmitigated risk posed by a non-compliant water control structure located within Silver Ridge Bluffs, all flood policies are subject to cancellation in 72 hours unless written confirmation of removal is provided. 72 hours. For an entire neighborhood. That night the clubhouse was packed so tightly you could feel the fear in the room. Carol stood at the front, slides of my dam projected behind her. "This isn't personal," she said. "It's about protecting our homes." People weren't angry. They were terrified. One neighbor stood up, voice cracking. "If insurance drops us, my mortgage goes into default. Dale, I can't lose my house over this." Their eyes weren't hateful, just desperate. Desperate people don't look for villains. They look for solutions. And the only solution they thought they had was me. My wife sat beside me, trembling. "Dale, please, I can't lose our home." The next morning, I made the hardest decision of my life. I hired the excavator. But I also set up cameras on every angle of my yard, because something in my gut whispered, if Carol was willing to lie to bring the dam down, what would happen when the water proved her wrong? The storm hit harder than anyone expected. By morning, the creek wasn't a creek anymore. It was a brown, surging river tearing through every backyard at the bottom of Silver Ridge Bluffs. Mark's tool shed was swallowed up to the windows. Jenna's patio chairs floated like lost boats. My own lawn looked like a lake. But the important part was obvious. This hadn't happened once since the dam existed, until the day it was gone. People came out in boots and raincoats, staring at the mess with a kind of sick disbelief. The whispers that once pointed at me now pointed at the HOA. At Carol. By the afternoon, an emergency HOA meeting was called. The clubhouse buzzed with fear and anger. The floor was muddy from residents tracking in floodwater. Every seat filled. People lined the walls. Some held their insurance letters in shaking hands. Carol walked to the front with her clipboard, dressed in a crisp blazer like she wasn't standing in a room full of people who just lost thousands of dollars. "Let's stay calm," she began, clicking her pen. "This flooding is an unfortunate act of nature, nothing to do with any recent actions taken to ensure community safety." The room erupted. "That dam kept us dry for years. You forced him to destroy it. You lied to the insurance company." Carol raised her voice. "Please, these accusations are out of line." "They're not accusations," I said, standing. "They're facts." Every head turned toward me, and for the first time in weeks, Carol's smile cracked. I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I let the evidence speak. I pulled my laptop from its case, set it on the table beside her, and played the first video. A split screen. Left side. My dam during a storm last month. Water rising, slowing, and draining cleanly. Right side. This morning's footage. Floodwater blasting through our yards with nothing to stop it. A low murmur spread through the room. Someone whispered, "Oh my God." Then I clicked to the next file. The sabotage recordings. Nighttime footage of branches, cinder blocks, and trash bags suddenly appearing at the dam. A shadow moving near the fence. My camera being twisted. Gasps. People stepped closer to the screen. "Here's the report from a licensed civil engineer," I said, holding up Nina's stamped evaluation. "Independent, verified. The dam was structurally sound. It improved drainage." I clicked again. Now my video showed Carol with a man in a reflective vest, standing over the marked easement line, pointing into my yard, handing him a document. The man nodded and took photos exactly where the later hazard images came from. Then came the final blow. I displayed the two maps side by side. My official plat map versus the altered map Carol sent to the insurance company, where she conveniently redrew the property line to claim my dam was on community land. The room went silent. Someone whispered, "That's fraud." Carol's face drained of color. "It's not what it looks like," she stammered. But the truth was already in the room. A board member, Jason, a man who'd barely spoken in years, stood up, voice trembling with anger. "Carol, did you send that document to the insurance company?" Jason, listen, I was trying to protect the community." "By lying?" someone shouted. "By faking an easement? You cost us thousands of dollars. You made us blame Dale. My basement is ruined because of you." Her composure crumbled. She clutched her clipboard like a shield, eyes darting between board members who suddenly refused to look at her. I didn't enjoy watching her fall apart. I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt tired. Exhausted from fighting someone who had turned my life into her personal power project. Jason slammed his hand onto the table. "I'm calling for an immediate vote to remove Carol Benton as president of Silver Ridge Bluffs HOA." Chairs scraped. Hands went up. Not a few. Not half. Nearly every hand in the room. Carol's mouth opened, but no words came out. She grabbed her papers, stumbled backward, and pushed through the crowd as people pulled their knees aside to avoid touching her. When the door shut behind her, the room exhaled in one long, shaky breath. Then the board voted again, unanimously, to rescind all actions taken against me, report Carol's fraud to the county, seek restitution for flood damages, issue a public apology to the entire community. Jason turned to me afterward. "Dale, we're fixing this, starting today." People clapped, some hugged, some apologized through tears, but I wasn't thinking about them. I was thinking about the creek outside, finally draining again, and what the water had revealed. When the vote ended and the meeting broke apart, the clubhouse felt like a storm had finally passed. People who hadn't looked me in the eye in weeks walked over, shoulders slumped, faces soft with regret. "Dale, we're sorry. You were right all along. We should have spoken up sooner." I didn't hold grudges. I was too tired for that. I just nodded, shook hands, and let the relief wash over me. That evening, Ellen and I sat on the back porch with mugs of tea, the yard still damp from the flood. Lights flickered across the cul-de-sac as neighbors stepped back outside, checking damage, offering tools, dragging ruined furniture to the curb. Ellen leaned against me. "I thought we were going to lose everything," she whispered. "So did I admitted. "But it's over now." Mark appeared at the fence holding a shovel. "Tomorrow morning I'm digging out that shed. You in?" I smiled. "I'll be there." For the first time in months, the neighborhood didn't feel like a battlefield. People weren't whispering behind blinds or tiptoeing around HOA threats. They were helping each other, muddy boots, messy hair, tired eyes, but helping. Something had shifted. The fear Carol spent years cultivating had cracked wide open, and in its place, something real grew: community. The HOA board wasted no time distancing themselves from Carol's mess. Within 2 days, every resident received a formal, written apology. It acknowledged the forged documents, the false claims to the insurance company, and the wrongful pressure placed on me to dismantle the dam. But the fallout didn't stop there. An independent attorney arrived to oversee damage assessments. Residents submitted photos, repair bills, and videos of flooded yards. Rivergate Mutual reinstated everyone's flood insurance once they saw the engineer reports, the real maps, and the footage proving Carol's manipulation. Then came the investigations. The county requested copies of all altered documents. Rivergate opened an internal review. Word spread quickly. Carol's forged easement map and fabricated safety report weren't being treated as misunderstandings. They were being treated as fraud. Meanwhile, the HOA board implemented reforms, actual, meaningful ones. Every violation now required clear, time-stamped photographs. Any drainage or flood-related concern demanded a licensed engineer's evaluation. All HOA meetings had to be recorded and publicly accessible. Property line disputes required official county paperwork, not edited PDFs. Mark and I joined the new oversight committee, not to chase power, but to make sure no one else went through what I had. As each new rule passed, I felt the weight of the last few months slowly lift. The system that once enabled Carol's control was being rebuilt piece by piece. For the first time in a long time, the HOA resembled what it should have been: a group meant to help, not a hammer waiting to strike. A month later, we rebuilt the dam. This time with a real county permit, Nina's upgraded design, and more volunteers than tools. Mark mixed concrete while Jenna passed out sandwiches. Kids painted colorful initials on the stones lining the channel. People joked, shared stories, even laughed. It wasn't just engineering, it was healing. And the new dam, solid, balanced, efficient, stood proudly where the old one had been torn away. When the next heavy storm rolled in, Ellen and I stood at the window. The creek swelled, pushing hard against the dam, but the structure held steady. Water slowed, leveled, and streamed into the overflow channel exactly as intended. Mark's voice shouted from outside, "Dale, yard's bone dry." He held up a thumbs up in the rain. I returned one, coffee steaming in my hand. 2 days later, word spread that Carol had put her house up for sale. No farewell party, no final HOA email. She simply vanished from the place she once ruled like a queen. Karma didn't need to be loud, it just needed a reason. On a quiet evening, Nina and I stood beside the new dam, watching water slide over the lip in a smooth arc. She really thought she could control a whole watershed, Nina said. And she thought she could rewrite the truth, I replied. The creek whispered against the rocks, steady and honest. The backyard felt peaceful again. Finally. You know, I said, gravity always wins. Nina laughed. And so does the truth. As the water flowed on, calm and clear, I realized something. The dam didn't just protect our homes. It restored what Carol had tried so hard to break. Our trust, our peace, and our voice. And the water carried that truth long after she was gone.